In today's video, I will show you how I like to create my Dataverse plugins and how do I structure them in order not to create additional complexity and engineering overhead. For some time, it gets to my attention that a lot of Power Platform developers are a bit hesitant to use Dataverse plugins in their projects. I think this is primarily because implementation process is not as straightforward as one would like it to be. And that's a shame, because throughout the years that I have been writing plugins, I could say that they can offer so much with very little hassle, especially when we're talking about project maintenance and support. So in this video, I will try to provide a way and a setup to utilize full capabilities of Dataverse plugins without the complexity that usually comes with it. Also, along the way, I'll cover just a touch more complex scenario so that you could have a better grasp how to utilize plugins in various scenarios. Finally, I will leave the link of all the code that I wrote in the description down below. And now, let's go straight to the action. Let me first set the stage of the functionality that we are building. Let's say we have a business logic that upon creation of opportunity record, we want to check that opportunity's account and its status. Also, we want to check all the other opportunities that are related to that account. In case account is suspended, we want to throw an error to our user and not allow to create that opportunity. And if our account contains at least one opportunity that was won within the period of 3 months, we want to set our newly created opportunities field named chance to high. So let's check now in the current situation of the system. Here I have my account entities and one in particular. And within the account record, we have a field which is called account status. And in this case, it's suspended. And now if I would go into my opportunities, I can try and create a new opportunity. And I will just assign a dummy ID number and I will choose my account. And if I will press save, it will allow me to save that opportunity. Now, this is not the behavior that we're expecting, so we will have to change that. I have already opened my Visual Studio, and in here, what we will do now is that we will create a new project. So I will just press a create a new project button. And in here, you will see already that on the left top side of the corner, I see class library .NET framework. You can also find it through search. And it's important to note that we're looking exactly for .NET framework, not .NET or .NET standard, because Dataverse plugins support only .NET framework. So I will double click on class library and it will lead me then to choose a project name. So when it comes to the project name, in this case, I will call it as DIS opportunity because it will create a class library and I want that class library to be dedicated to one entity. Later on, if I would want to expand my project, I would create additional class libraries for different entities, which means that each class library will be represented by one entity. Now, when it comes to solution name, you can use your imagination and call it whatever you like, but I like to call it after the project that I'm developing. So as I mentioned, the project name will be DIS opportunity, and my solution name will be DIS hub plugins. And then just press create. So the class library was already created. And within it, we have already one class, which is class 1. But before I start working on it, I want to explain a little bit about the naming convention of my classes. First part in naming will be the entity name that I will be running this class against. So in this case, it will be DIS opportunity. Next part of the name will be the event that will trigger the logic in this class. So in this particular case, we will be triggering it on create event. If it would be an update event, it would be update. And the last part, which is a little bit complex, but we will try to simplify it as much as possible, is the stage of operation. So in this case, we will just talk about two scenarios, one of which is pre-operation and the other one is post-operation. When I'm talking about operation, we are mainly talking about the writing into the database operation. So it means, are we executing our logic before record was created in the database or afterwards? There are some critical differences between these two stages, but we will develop our logic in pre-operation manner. So I will write pre and operation. So this will allow us to name the class, and you can see already the pattern that for whichever event I would create, I would then create a new class. So for example, if I would have some logic whenever entity is updated and I want to run that logic when the data lands on the database, I would call my class as dis opportunity update post operation. Next step along the way will be the installation of required NuGet packages. So in this case, we have only one NuGet package that we want to install. And to do so, you would press right click on your class library, go into browse for NuGet packages, and in here you would write CRM. That will represent the first option, that is Microsoft CRM SDK core assemblies. So this will install all the goodies that will allow us to develop our plugin. So just press install and Visual Studio will do the rest. Just apply, agree, and that's it. One last thing before we can jump in writing our code is to sign the assembly. To do so, click on your class library, go into properties and into signing part. In here, you will have to check the checkbox, which is called sign the assembly. Go for a dropbar, create a new key file. And in here, I will not protect it by a password and I will just name it key. And that's it. It's basically now signed. And once it's signed, it will allow you to register that assembly in Dataverse. Since we have our prerequisites in place, we can start writing our code. And first thing that I will do is I will implement iPlugin interface. To do so, what you want to do is to write a column and then just write iPlugin. Also, you want to change your class into public. And when I write my iPlugin, there is this really nice IntelliSense that will suggest what kind of additional things I have to do to implement this plugin. So first thing is that I need to use Microsoft XRM SDK. So I will do that. It will create a line here. And also to implement it fully, I will just press again on this IntelliSense and I will ask to implement the interface. And that will create our execute class. That will be the entry point to our plugin execution logic. Next step will be creating our context object that will allow us to reach all sorts of metadata that is related to plugin execution. For example, what kind of user triggered the plugin. To do so, I will have to write the following. iPlugin execution context. I will name it as context. I'll have to cast it. Then I will use service provider and its method called getService. And as an input parameter, I will have to set the type of service that I want to get. And in this case, again, it's iPlugin execution context. Next step for us is to create our service factory. So in here, what we will do is very similar to context creation. It's of type iOrganization service factory. We will call it service factory. Again, I will need to cast it. I will use the same service provider method getService, type of iOrganization service factory. Once we have our service factory, we can then use both context and service factory to create our service object. So in here, it will be iOrganization service. We will call it service. And this will be service factory dot create organization service. And in here, we will need to provide the user ID of user who will be running the logic of the plugin. And we can get that user ID from the context. So I will say context and get me user ID. And that's basically it. There is one additional object that we will create, which is not necessary, but it helps us a lot. And that object is tracing service. To create our tracing service, it's very much similar situation as with context or service factory. Calling it tracing, again, casting it, using service provider. Now to recap, what we just did is that we created a context which will contain all the metadata of our execution, business unit ID, user ID, input parameters, and so on. Then we have our service factory that allowed us to create service object, and service object will allow us to execute certain operations. For example, create entities, update entities, if needs be, delete entities. And last but not least, we've created a tracing, which will allow us to log our plugin execution for debugging purposes or just plain logging. Since now we have everything in place, I can start writing my actual execution code. I will first of all create my input parameter as an entity. I will call it opportunity and it will be equal to context dot input parameters, and input parameters will contain property called target. Now it will give me an error because I need to cast it as an entity. And this is how we get our opportunity record in place. Now, if you remember, we said that we want to execute our logic whenever opportunity contains an account that is suspended. So first thing that we want to do is actually to get the account that is related to this opportunity. So first off, what I will do is I will check if this newly created opportunity contains an account. To do so, I will say opportunity dot contains, and in here I can provide the name, and in this case it's this account. And if it's true, or actually I will do if it's not true, then we will just return from the code execution, because then we're not interested. So if we are following through this if statement, we can then be assured that entity, that relationship to account exists, and we want to create an entity reference that would encapsulate that relationship. So I will call it opportunity account, and to get that account I will say opportunity get attribute value. In here it will be entity reference. The logical name will be this account. So entity reference of account will only contain so much information, but in order for us to check if it's suspended or not, we need to retrieve the actual account record from the system. And in here we can do it by leveraging the service object. So I will say entity account, and I will say service dot retrieve. And in here I will need to first of all define what is the logical name of the entity I want to retrieve, which is account in this case. Then I will need to provide the ID, and ID we got from our entity reference. So I can say opportunity account dot, and it will suggest me the ID value. And last part is actually getting our columns and defining what kind of columns we want to retrieve. So in here I will say new column set, and in here, just for the simplicity, I will say true. This is a bad practice, to be honest. You would need to define it by string values, what kind of fields you would like to fetch. You don't really want to fetch every time all the fields, because that adds to performance and it's not good. It's just for the simple demonstration now, I just added true because I don't remember the logical name of the field that I'm fetching. And in order not to have this clutter in my code, I will just move this statement to using in the beginning. So this will return our account record, one account record that will contain all the columns. Now, since we have our account entity retrieved, we can check if our account is actually suspended or not. To do so, I will write an if statement, and if in this if statement I will say account contains, and for starters I will just check if that field contains a value, and this field name is account status with prefix, of course. If account contains this field, I will check what is the actual value of that field. I will say get attribute value. I will cast it as option set value because this is the type of my field. I will provide the logical name of it, and I will say that I need the value of this field. And finally, I will check if that value is equal to this integer, which is suspended value. So if these conditions are met, we want to throw an error. I will say throw new invalid plugin execution exception. And in here, I will provide the reason, which is account is suspended. And that's basically it. Now it's important to mention plugin execution step, which is pre-operation in this case. We are throwing an error before the opportunity is created. The entity will not yet be created in the Dataverse, and the user will get the notification. If it would be post-operation synchronous process, user would get the exception after the record would be created in the Dataverse, which is not what we're looking after in this case. So the first scenario is already completed. If our account is suspended, we will send the error message to the user saying that you can't create an opportunity. Now the next scenario is actually to check if our account contains other opportunities that might have been closed within the period of 3 months. And if there are any, we would like to set our current opportunities field named chance to high. So I will start by actually creating a fetch XML statement that will allow us to fetch all the other opportunities that we're interested in. I will now drag the window of advanced find. You can find this dialog in advanced settings of your model-driven apps. There are so many ways how you can do it. You can also use, for example, XRM Toolbox Fetch XML Builder, but this is just a very simple way how I like to do it. So I will find the opportunities record. I will select account and I will say it equals to certain company. Now also also I will check if that opportunity was created in last 3 months. In general, you would like to check if it was won within 3 months, but I haven't yet implemented that functionality, so we will just keep it a bit more simple and we will check if the opportunities were created in the last 3 months, but the general idea is still the same. So I will say if last X months, and in here I will say 3. So this fetch XML will then retrieve me the opportunities that were created in last 3 months. And then I will say just download fetch XML. This will download me the fetch XML file that I will open. I will copy the XML and I will then open a notepad and I will copy my fetch XML into notepad and I will do just a few changes. I will go for replace, and first of all I will replace the double quotes with single quotes and I will remove some unnecessary data here. So I will remove UI name and UI type. We want also to remove the value in account, and this is fair enough. We will copy now this code, can close our notepad and create our fetch XML string. So I will call it just fetch XML. I will say equals and I will do @ $, and I will post my string in here. So for value, we want to assign it to account ID. I will add my account.id, and this is our fetch XML. Now we want to retrieve the entities from it. So I will say entity collection and I will call it other opportunities equals service dot retrieve multiple. So now we are retrieving multiple records, and in here we will say new fetch expression, and for our fetch expression we will provide our fetch XML. So this line will retrieve us the entity collection. Basically, if there are any entities, it will retrieve all those entities. Now next, what we want to do is actually to check if our entity collection contains at least one other record. So we will do additional if statement. We will say if other opportunities dot entities count is greater than 0. And if so, then we want to update our original opportunity. Now, since we are in pre-operation, we can supplement data to our target entity without needing to update it separately. If we would be now in post-operation, the opportunity data would be already in the database, and for us to add any additional changes, we would need to call service.update. But since we are pre-operation, we can intercept that target, supplement it with additional data, and then let it go into the database. In the beginning, we defined our entity from input parameters as a target. So we can actually take this opportunity and supplement it with additional data. So in here, I will say opportunity dot attributes, and I will define which attribute I'm interested in, and it will be equals to new option set value, and I will need to provide the number for it. And that's basically it. We don't need to do anything else. When the code executes, it will then automatically assign this attribute to our opportunities. Of course, if we have any other opportunities created in the system. And next step is actually registering our plugin in Dataverse. To register your plugin, you will need to open your Xroom toolbox and locate plugin registration tool. In case you haven't yet installed plugin registration tool, you can go into configuration, tools library, and locate it there and then just install. It's simple as that. Once you installed your plugin registration tool, you can launch it. And in here, you will want to press on register and register new assembly. To register your assembly, you will need to locate it. Go to bin/debug folder and locate DLL, which name matches to your project name. So in my case, I'm looking for DIS opportunity DLL. I'm here in my project folder and I see my DIS opportunity DLL. I will double click on it and just press register selected plugins. Once that is done, we will need to register our step. Step is just an instruction that tells Dataverse when we want to run our plugin. So I will just right click on my opportunity and I will say register new step. Be careful, sometimes it happens with the tool that event handler will be selected as some other. So in such case, try to locate your plugin in here. So I will just reselect to the IS opportunity. Sometimes this happens, it's just a small bug. For message, write create. Now primary entity will be DIS opportunity opportunity, we will want to select only account as an attribute that triggers our logic, because as we discussed earlier, whenever account is suspended, we want to throw an error. In case account is not assigned to our opportunity, I don't really want to run the plugin. So I will select that I will trigger the plugin on none of the attributes and then just select account and press OK. So now our plugin will be launched whenever the opportunity is created with account entity as a reference. As for event pipeline and stage of execution, I will select pre-operation, and execution mode will be synchronous. It goes without the saying, whenever you choose pre-operation, it's only possible to register your plugin as asynchronous, because it makes no sense in registering your plugin as asynchronous and in pre-operation. And last thing to do is just to press register new step, and that's it. Our plugin is now registered. We can go and test it. I am now in my Dataverse environment, and I already opened the account for which I will try to create an opportunity record. So you can see already that my account is suspended. So if I will go now into related, into opportunities, and if I will try to create a new opportunity, I'm expecting to get an error. So I will just write test opportunity as a name. I will assign some random number as an amount, and I will press save and close. And I can see that I already got an error message saying that my account is suspended, therefore I can't create my opportunity. And this is the behavior that I was expecting. Now let's discard this change. Let's go into our summary, and instead of suspended, let's say that our account is active. And let's then again try to create an opportunity. So I will say create an opportunity. Again, let's name it this, and let's assign amount of now 2000 for instance, and say save and close. So now we can see that our new opportunity is created. But if I will open it, I will see that the chance of winning this opportunity is high, because this account had one additional opportunity in its disposal, and our logic is saying if account has at least one other opportunity, make the newest opportunity chance as high. Now let's go back into the code and let's see how we could extend our solution with additional steps, additional entities, and so on. So now I'm again back in my Visual Studio environment, and now we will talk about two different scenarios: how we could implement additional plugins for other entities, and how we could implement more additional steps and event logic for our opportunity entity. So now let's cover the scenario if I would like to create an event for my opportunity, and I, for example, would like to create logic on opportunity update post operation event. To do so, I would create an additional class for my opportunity library. So I would say add new item, this opportunity update post operation. And that's it. Basically now what we want to do again is change our class into public and implement our iPlugin interface and follow up with the logic that would apply for our update post operation. Now, if we would like to extend our plugins for additional entities, what I like to do is actually for each additional entity to create another class library. So let's say I want to create a plugin for my account entity. So then I would press right on my solution file and I would say add new project. So for my account, I would add additional .NET class library. I would call it by my entity name, and then again the procedure would follow the same as for opportunity. I would need to sign it, I would need to install my Nugget packages for it, and then just create my classes based on the events and pipeline stages. So I wanted to record this video to show you a relatively easy way to set up your Dataverse plugins. It's by far not the best practice, nor it was intended to be so, but it serves the purpose of creating a low entry barrier so that any Power Platform developer could start with this crucial part of Dataverse functionality. As usual, I appreciate you watching these videos, and if you like my content, feel free to give it a like or subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.